Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Crosby from In Care Relationships. I'm a life and relationship coach, and I often say that I help people who love each other get along. All right, so today we're talking about some truths about me as a relationship coach. And I thought this was a good topic for all of us to contemplate in terms of what we're good at and how we might uh, acknowledge that in ourselves. And so I have a few stories for you, some examples, and let's dive in. All right. So anybody with any kind of public presence, like a storyteller or a comedian, they'll tell you that it's really important to find out what you do well and do that as often as you can. And so, for instance, comedians have specialties. Carol Burnett was great with characters and she was great with physical humor. So was Chevy Chase. Um, Victor Borga was a really, if you don't know him, look him up. Victor and then Borga, Borge. He was great with musical comedy, just sitting at the piano, famous for stopping and starting, playing the piano. Joan Rivers was really great with one-liners, and the guys on Whose Line Is It? Whose Line Is It Anyway? You know, those actors, Ryan Stiles and Wayne Brady and Colin Mockery, they were just brilliant at improv. And so knowing what you do well and doing it really often is I think it's a good thing to contemplate and to do and to acknowledge in yourself. I was recently listening to a podcast by Trevor Noah. It's his podcast. And I think it's called What Now? Or it's a title, something like that. And he was talking to a fellow comedian, Kevin Hart, and they were discussing this whole thing about the differences between them as comedians and what they do well and what they don't. And they were talking about the importance of always experimenting. You know, they try out new material in small venues, and if it's good, they keep it, and if it's not, they toss it or alter it or whatever. But they said that once you find out really what you do well as a comedian on stage, then you kind of need to stay in your lane and really do that and really accentuate that. It's an evolving process, you know, always experimenting and trying new things and then adding to what you do, but basically that you have a style. Kevin Hart doesn't do political humor. Trevor Noah does it really well, and they were talking about some differences that way. So I got to thinking about you and what you do well. So as we go today, you know, think about that as a contemplation. And I'm going to tell you some things about me as a relationship coach, and maybe that will prompt more thought on your side about what you do well. All right, so the first thing I do well is that because of my history, I have a lot of room for mistakes and flub ups and do-overs and trial and error and oops. I have a lot of room for that. And why would that be? Because I've been married 4 times. And in marriage 1, 2, and 3, I messed up a lot. You know, one of the biggest mistakes, if you will, one of the biggest goofs was that I kept showing up as the same person. I didn't do what Kevin Hart and Trevor Noah were talking about in the podcast. They were talking about how they try out new material. I can't say I did that so well. I didn't, I just sort of stayed in my lane and showed up in each marriage as the same person I was the last time, hoping for a better result. Oops. So in marriage number 4, when that marriage fell down, I did a complete redo. I've talked about that in other shows, so I won't go into that today. But I have a lot of room for clients to find their way. I don't have a formula that about relationships that I think clients should follow. I don't think that serves people. And so I help people come up with their way of finding out what's real and true for them, even if they promise something like, I'm gonna break up with this guy and I'm going to not talk to him for 3 months, and then they don't do that. Still, it's okay. So I trust what people do. I trust that there's a good reason for what they're doing, and then we explore that. All right, the second thing I do well is I'm not a coddler. I know that might be an odd thing to say, but so what is a coddler? A coddler means that rather than being honest with a person about how you feel or what you think, you prefer to keep it to yourself in order to protect their feelings and not rock the boat. So, or to treat with extreme or excessive care or kindness, to a fault. So is coddling bad? I don't think coddling is what people pay me for. So that wouldn't really work for me. I want to give you an example. I was listening to an online summit once, and I don't remember the title of it, but it was healers and new age people and people talking about having a better life. I'll just say it that way. But the organizer of the summit was talking, and she is someone that I experience as a coddler. And she was drawing us together as a group, that we should pat ourselves on the head about how hard we have it these days. She was kind of, in my opinion, uniting us in this sort of stressful, gosh, we all have it so bad. And I was about to bow out of the whole thing. And then Marianne Williamson came on and she says, hold your horses. I mean, she didn't say that, but basically she said, come on, let's think this. Let's rethink this. Here's what our grandmothers had to deal with. And she gave, a quick history of things and said, there's no comparison. Let's stop whining. She didn't say, let's stop whining, but her whole approach and attitude was, come on, let's not whine about this. Our grandmothers paved the way for us. Let's go farther. Let's see what we can do together. Let's stand in our power, our influence, our intelligence, our innate ability to love. Let's do that and then see how far we can evolve things today. So I'm just saying, if you work with me, that second approach of Marianne Williamson, that idea of we can do more, we can, pull up our big girl pants. That's my approach as well. So yes, in my sessions, share what's going on with you, get it out there, get it out of you. It's better out than in. I'll hold the trash can while you unload. But then once you've made space in yourself, once you are empty enough, then you have room to observe more clearly what just happened and why you reacted and how you reacted. And so I always ask clients to sort of once they empty, I ask them to sort of step back with me, grab hands with me, and look at that thing over there that happened for you. And it's a really valuable process. Once the resistance is out, then there's a possibility of accepting or being with what happened, which is always a good thing. So when you work with me, I help you do that, step back and take a look at facts rather than continuing to be the reaction itself. If you are your reaction, if you are your opinion, if the opinion is running you, if the judgment is running you, then you have no power to change anything. So that's what we do together. So no coddling. Like I said, I don't think that's why people come to me. Expressing yourself, yes, accepting the situation, learning to accept the situation and kind of take it at face value and receiving it, yes. Learning from the situation, yes. Doing something authentic about it, absolutely. All right. So that's the next thing. Okay, so another feature, another thing I do well is I believe I learn more. I know how to learn about relationships, and I often learn more, and I'm dedicated to it. So I learn more about relationships very often by looking outside of the field of relationships. As I mentioned, I listen to comedians, I listen to storytellers, but something else I do is I take long walks in nature, and I look at nature. I study trees and I study plants, and I notice the sun and the weather. Things are not always growing. Sometimes our lives are like seasons of the year. We're not always growing. Sometimes we're resting. Trees rest all winter, and then they're ready for spring. They drop their leaves. Sometimes life feels like I have felt like a bare tree, and thought that was not okay. But then I realized by looking around at Mother Nature that that's actually a good thing. When it rains, it rains. Rain is a good thing and clouds are a good thing. So that's just a really simple example of what I'm talking about. I also read scientists and researchers in other fields. I love Frank Wilczek. He's a quantum physicist. I love Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she writes about indigenous wisdom and moss. She's a scientist that knows a lot about mosses, those little green bunches that grow on logs. She knows all about them. All right. So here's a quote from her. And so I'll give you a couple of examples from her. She said, in indigenous ways of knowing, it is understood that each living being has a particular role to play. Every being is endowed with certain gifts, its own intelligence, its own spirit, its own story. Our stories tell us that the Creator gave these to us as original instructions. The foundation of education is to discover that gift within us and learn to use it well. So in families and in relationships and partnerships, even though we may not understand our partner, that partner has a very particular journey and things to learn and ways of being that are different from ours. And so if we remember indigenous wisdom and apply that to relationships, that's an example. Here's one more from her. Being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized is to know that your ancestors lie in the ground. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's future matters, to take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it, because they do. So relationships and connections also feed us. We need to take care of them. And the wisdom of our dead ancestors is always available to us telepathically. It's available if we ask in our meditation to receive the wisdom of our ancestors. And if we take care of our partnership and we are a good example of love and respect for our children, then we are living as if the future matters. So do you see what I'm saying? That's just one example of learning from another field of study. So you can often learn more about your field of study by looking outside your field of study. So if you want to know about parenting, look outside parenting to something else you love and learn about being a parent through this other vantage point. Okay. Number 4. I believe there is one big missing ingredient in most relationship troubles. And so as a relationship coach, you need to know this about me. And I believe that this is and I've spoken about it a lot on other shows, so I won't go into it in depth here, but I probably will again in the future. But it has to do with the fact that my trouble about my partner isn't actually about my partner, it's about me. And it doesn't mean that you blame yourself, and it doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean that. It means that you and I, when we get triggered by someone else, it's really not about them doing whatever they did. It's about that wounded place that caused the trigger in us. And so my work with people is really about finding out more about that. And that's a really key thing that I've learned in 40 years of working with people. So that's number 4. Number 5, I really believe in transparency. I think I do transparency well in sessions with clients. Here's an example. So when I work with couples, there's something I do called mouse in the corner. It sort of fondly became known as that after couples did that with me. It's described fully in my book, How to Save Your Fourth Marriage. But just briefly, in Mouse in the Corner, one partner temporarily steps out of active participation in the conversation to observe me working with their partner. And their agreement is to be quiet as a mouse. They don't, they can write notes that they ask questions later, but they can't interrupt. And they can't bring attention to themselves by making, funny noises or, indicating their disagreement about something. So of course, both people agree to this before we do it. But what is the point of the transparency in Mouse in the Corner? Well, it creates a safe space. One partner can speak their truth, without the other person jumping all over it. So in a particularly volatile situation, this is a really helpful thing. It's especially helpful with partners who interrupt or argue. That's one. It also provides 2 kinds of learning. So for the partner who speaks, it's a supervised occasion to own their truth. And then the quiet partner, the one that's being silent, is learning to receive, just taking it in. That's a valuable skill. It creates trust between both me and both clients through full transparency. So if a husband starts attending sessions, let's say the wife started with me and then she invites her husband to come, and then he starts coming, sometimes what I'll do in the first session is let him watch me work with her. And then he knows by me doing that he will be treated fairly. It's not 2 women against 1 guy. It's kind of a key thing. And so it relaxes him that he'll be treated with fairness. And then when it's his turn to speak, he will do so without hesitation. So it lends particular power in a situation where I work something out with one of the partners and the other partner doesn't get blamed. All right, last one. I believe that theories are great, but being practical is essential. And that's something I also do well in sessions. For example, we know that love and kindness works. We know that. I mean, who doesn't know that? It's not new news, but what I find is that even or especially really smart people have trouble applying that from time to time in relationships. I had trouble applying that. That we don't really know how to put kindness and love put kindness and love to work in our relationships, not often enough, not clearly enough, not consistent enough, and especially not when we're stressed. And so that's something that we do in sessions. So this whole, besides telling you my strengths, I would call them as a relationship coach, I am encouraging you to look at your strengths and what you do well and use those skills more often. You know, Mark Manson, who is a writer, he talks about doing what you love as often as you can. And writing is something that he loves so much, he would do it for free. And he often says to people, I was listening to or reading something that he posted one day, and he was talking about what you really love is easy to find because you would do that thing whether or not you were paid for it. That was one of the things he said. So I know we've covered a fair amount today. So let me do a quick review. The whole idea is to know what you do well and to acknowledge that in yourself and really take time to express it more often and appreciate that you can. What I mentioned that I do well as a relationship coach and things that you need to know about my style if you're thinking of working with me is that number one, I have a lot of room for mistakes. Learning by trial and error, messing up and trying again, falling down and getting up, learning things. You know, for me, I think that's the way many of us learn things in a very thorough way. Number two, I'm not a coddler. I will always be direct with you. And my style is compassionate, but it's also direct and solution focused. We won't spend tons of time unwrapping the issue. We'll unwrap it enough to see what's going on, absolutely. But then I'll ask you, as I said, to stand back with me and observe and learn from what you've done in that particular situation. Anyway, it's a really wonderful process and really effective. So I'll guide you towards your strengths as efficiently as I can, because when we come from that place, what we do well, and we apply that to any situation, it moves faster. All right. The third one was that sometimes the way to learn the most about your field of study and what you do well is to step out of your field of study and look back from another vantage point. Number four, our problem is never about the other person. It's more about us. 5, transparency works. I gave you the example of mouse in the corner, but it's a general approach to life and sessions with people that I think is important and helpful. And the last one, I believe that relationship work is most helpful if it's practical. That theories are nice, but if you can apply the concepts to your everyday life in a really down to earth way, then that changes the quality of your life. And I think the quality of our lives, how satisfied we are, how resilient we are, how loving and respectful we are, how curious we are. I think all of that is really important, and it adds to the quality of our relationship with ourselves and with each other. All right. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for sharing this episode. If there's someone that you know that could benefit from this, please pass it on. And If you need my assistance with your relationship, go to incareofrelationships.com and you can contact me through there. In the meantime, and I'll see you on the next session. And in the meantime, thank you very much for being here today, and take very, very, very good care of yourself.